Hey everybody, Corey Weathers here. It is Monday and it's noon my time, Central Time, and we are back for another Facebook Live on the next chapter of Sacred Spaces. And again, those of you who are not reading Sacred Spaces, I think we're going to cover topics that definitely relate to your world as well. So whether you're a first responder or a military service member or a military spouse, we're going to talk a lot about, it sounds like a military term, but we're going to talk about family readiness and the cost of putting the mission first today. And we're going to be covering the chapter of family bonds. So I am going to just share this to our Life Giver group. Those of you who are in the group and are going through the book study, I actually posted some questions that everybody's answering on that page, and then later today I'm actually going to give a Starbucks card away to those who actually comment and answer the questions. So I'm going to share that, and if you are listening and if you're tuning in, I would love if you would share it as well. So that is shared. Okay, so I am back. Thank you guys for your patience and your grace while I was traveling. If you hear a little kitty in the background, my sweet new kitten Meg is probably going to join us up on the desk here in a minute. She's learning her manners still, so we'll see what happens. But we are going to talk a little bit about mission readiness, and this has been on my mind just a little bit lately for lots of reasons. One, because the chapters leading up to today, I want to introduce you to Meg because she would like to say hi. Apparently she's saying hi already. Everybody say hi, Meg. This is Meg, our new cat, New Weathers friend. So we'll see if she is willing to be quiet. She likes to be part of everything. So we've been talking about mission readiness, and it's come up a lot in the last week or so. The chapters leading up to today, we've been talking a little bit. If you go back and listen to some of the previous Monday Facebook Lives, we've been talking about doing bigger things. We've been talking about what does it mean to be a military spouse, being a military couple. What does it mean to pursue your marriage just a little bit more? And we've been talking a little bit about my trip and my week-long trip overseas, where I got to experience kind of like a mini deployment. And I know those of you who are first responders, you kind of go through a mini deployment every day, whether somebody has told you that or not. And my experience going overseas allowed Matt and I to have this role reversal where I got to experience those pre-deployment feelings and then actually leave on this trip and go overseas and experience a couple of things that are specific to what he goes through when he's been through deployment or been away on trainings. Even something like what it's like to be unavailable, what it's like, in this chapter of Family Bonds, having that experience of actually going overseas and realizing that I didn't have access to Wi-Fi. I couldn't even call and tell him that I had arrived somewhere safe. I just really had to wait until it was convenient and I had the opportunity. And he was the one that had to be back at home waiting to get that call, not knowing where I was or if I was okay, and just needing to wait and make sure that if he needed to know something, he would find out about something. And so I think I had gone over 24 hours before I could actually reach out to him and let him know that all was well. And so it was a very, very unique role reversal. But in previous videos up until this point, I've shared a little bit about what it was like for him to release me to the mission and for him to just say, you know what, take care of what you've been called to do. Don't worry about being back at home. We're kind of revolving around you, and you go and do what you're called to do for the sake of the mission that I had on this trip. And how wonderful of a feeling that was to be given that permission, to be given that space and that freedom to set my sights on that. And I've encouraged everybody in the book and even in the videos up until today even to think about just how much influence you have in your service spouse's life to be able to allow them to keep focused on the mission. And the military is very good about telling families about put the mission first, don't stress out your soldier, all those kind of statements. And so I wanted to actually address that today because I posted in the Life Giver group the questions that we're kind of going through with these chapters. And I asked the question about what has been your experience of knowing how important it is to be able to support your spouse in that way. This is specifically for military spouses. What is it about you supporting your spouse so that they can be mission-minded? And we're told that by the military a lot. Now, as I was asking these military spouses that question, now, by the way, I did also ask service spouses, share a time when your spouse has held down that home front or has made it possible for you to focus on the mission at hand, because I really think that we should be sharing those in our marriages, those successes, those wins, those, man, you make a difference in my life when you support me the way that you do. And I think that we as a couple need to be sharing that from both sides. So I think that's a little bit of what I'm going to be talking about today. But simultaneously in the last week, I went to a meeting here on the installation that we are at now, and it was a similar message that was put out about how much we have influence as spouses into helping our service members succeed. And while what they were saying was right, I feel like we need to change our tone and change our language just a little bit, coming from both sides. Because what I think is happening, and this happened in the Life Giver group as well, when I asked that question, we as spouses know that the mission comes first. They deploy when they have to deploy. They go to trainings when they have to go to trainings. And all of that is incredibly important, right? We all know that if that service member or if that first responder is not focused on that mission when they're called to do that mission, and then their safety and the safety of others is put at risk. And so we do a really good job, I think, of making sure that they feel like the mission comes first and that we are understanding and flexible with that. And even in the meeting that I was in this past week, they kept using the word be fluid, like it was a phrase. Just be fluid and just be flexible. And I'm not saying this in a cynical way. I just want to be able to give voice today to some feelings and thoughts that I think a lot of military families have, and maybe look at things from both sides, and maybe introduce some new terminology, some new ways of saying things, new ways of encouraging each other, especially in our marriages. So please hear what I'm saying today, not as criticism, but more as a challenge and vision casting of what could it look like if we just change our tone just slightly. So if you are watching, tell me where you're coming from. I'm going to text my children to come and get Meg, our cat, and save me from the cat crying. And that will help us just a little bit. So hold on one second. Okay, so tell me where you're coming from, because I know we have a lot of people watching, and I want to know where you guys are coming from. And I also want to know what branch you guys are coming from today too. Are you Army? Are you Air Force, Navy, Marines? Are you first responder? So share a little bit about that, because I think that this book and this topic applies to everybody today. And I know Family Bonds, the chapter that we're covering today, really talks a lot about Air Force, and so I hope to get to that as well. But going back to this whole concept about what does it mean to ask our family members to really be fluid and really put that mission first and always be mindful of the mission. Culturally, here's where I'm coming from. Culturally, we are at a place where we have been asking military families for going on 18 years of global conflict and war to be fluid, to keep the mission first. And I absolutely agree, hear me say this, I absolutely agree that we need to be mindful of our influence as family members on the mission and on the service member and what they need to be able to do, especially during a deployment or for a first responder when they're out on a call. So I do believe in that. But when you have families, let's take a look at the culture and what's going on with the culture right now. When you have families that for 18 years have been putting the mission first and for some families, putting the service member or the serving spouse first, what happens is you get this, I don't know what to call it. It's like a selfless fatigue, if I can call it that. It is after years and years of putting the other person first or revolving the family around that person for so long without end, what we have is fatigue. It's almost like a selflessness fatigue, because we've been asking families to bend and cater and be fluid for so long, especially when you have, especially active duty families who have been moving a lot. I'm putting my hand up on this one, who've been moving a lot and their life has been disrupted. Now, there's so many serving spouses out there that carry the weight of guilt because their job has asked a lot of their family members. And so we need to be attentive to the fact that both sides really struggle with something here. One's not necessarily more important than the other. But I think that when we've been asking families to be fluid for so long and put that serving spouse first and revolve around that spouse, what we have is a fatigue that's setting in. And I'm even hearing from a lot of military spouses and first responder spouses too, who are saying, I'm just exhausted. I'm exhausted of revolving around that and also trying to control the chaos that feels so chaotic all the time. And so we're getting not only that fatigue, but we're getting that resentment. And then there's some spouses out there, and I've been there too, where you don't want to be vulnerable with your spouse and tell them how fatigued you are, how much you might be struggling, how lonely you might be, how you haven't been able to have that level of self-care for a really long time, because you don't want to stress them out and because the mission comes first. And we also don't, especially if they're on a deployment, we're not going to share with them the fact that we're struggling. And so we hold all that in. Now, the human mind, the way that we handle stress is that we kind of we repress it and we bottle it up, and usually people respond to that level of stress in one of two ways. Either we implode or we explode. So exploding looks like impulsive behavior, anger, lashing out, falling apart, and it usually comes out in kind of explosive ways. But there's another camp that's imploders, and we don't give them a lot of attention, but imploders kind of fall apart just as much, but they do it quieter. And that looks like anxiety, it looks like depression, it looks like isolation. For most of them, I hope, though, if that's you, those families are turning to counseling, but they're just not doing great. And so we have a lot of families, a lot of military spouses who I see are on the brink of imploding, because exploding feels like it's a socially unacceptable thing to do, especially as a military or first responder spouse, because we're supposed to have it all together. We're supposed to not fall apart, because if we fall apart, then we feel like our reputation falls apart, our spouse's reputation falls apart. We're not playing the part of a strong military spouse, and we don't want to stress them out, and the mission comes first. And so what ends up happening is we have a lot of marriages that are falling apart, and for lots of reasons, but for the military and first responder spouse side, we have imploding that's happening. So when I ask a simple question this week that says, what does it mean to make the mission first and give your spouse that release to say, it's okay that you have to go and do what you're called to do, knowing that it's going to pull you away from your family, knowing that it's going to ask you to be a little bit more distant and detached so that you can focus on the mission at hand. When I ask, what kind of influence do you have in making that possible? I get a couple of things. I get one, absolutely 100%, we are a part of mission effectiveness and family readiness. And the DoD tells us that all the time, right? Family readiness is hugely important. If the family isn't backing that service member, then the service member isn't going to be fully focused, and that affects the mission. So on one hand, I get that kind of like regurgitated out, like as if we've been trained with all the right words to say, yes, absolutely, I am a part of mission effectiveness, and family readiness is super important, and I'm going to stay, I'm proud to stand behind my service member to make sure that they are eyes forward and focused on the mission. And then on the other hand, what I get is, but I'm so tired, and it's been years and years and years that I've been asked to do this, and this imploding is now turning to resentment, that I don't know how to be vulnerable with my spouse, I don't know how to be vulnerable with leaders, I don't know how to be vulnerable with the cost of what it's being asked of us. Now, so if that's resonating with you, I'd love to hear from those of you who are watching. I see we have people coming in from everywhere. Fort Carson, let's see, is it Schofield Barracks, DC area? Megan, thank you. That you are one of those that made a very important comment on the Lifegiver page, and I'm kind of pulling from your vulnerability, and I appreciate that. Moved every other year, deployment before or after since 2011. So Marie is talking about how exhausting it is with 3 babies. So this is, I know, going to hit a nerve for so many people that are watching. And Obviously, I can't offer the biggest solution and fix everything, but here's a couple things that I was thinking of this past week. Number one, if you have any kind of leadership opportunities, if you have leadership responsibilities of any kind, I think it's important that we learn to adjust language wherever possible. And that doesn't mean that we change everything. It doesn't mean that we say that family readiness is not important and we don't address family readiness, because we all agree family readiness is a very big part of the mission and mission effectiveness. But what I'd like to do is introduce you to the word "and." That it can't be just family readiness. It has to be family readiness, and what are we going to do to encourage the families at home to take a look at self-care, give opportunities for self-care, and just give opportunities to seeing them for what we've been asking them to do. So if you are a leader, what I am encouraging you to do right now, or if you are a military spouse leader, that you can take this to your commanders, you can take this to your generals, you can take this to whoever it is that needs to hear. And I believe that if you communicate in kindness, and if you communicate with confidence, confidence is not the same thing as pride. Pride says I'm the most important person in the room and I know everything and I know more than whoever else is in the room. That's not what we're coming in to do. We're coming in to say I have confidence in the experience that I have, and that what I'm asking for, or the wisdom that I'm sharing, has validity to it. That's confidence. And I think that especially as military families, we need to be able to start communicating a little bit more with confidence and help our leaders communicate a little bit more with effectiveness. So I love hearing leaders say, you are a part of mission readiness and family readiness is important to me. What I would like to see, though, is for leaders to also say, but we also see you. That's the and. Family readiness is important, and we see you. We see how tired you are. We see what we've been asking from you for a very long time. We see the impact that has had on you and your family, and that we understand that what we are asking from you may feel like too much at times, that what we may be asking for may be more difficult for some than others, that some of you guys are in a very good place and you're ready to volunteer and serve each other and help each other out through this season, and that there are others of you who may not have that energy and that may not be in a season where you can give a lot, and that's okay too, that we believe that family readiness is important and we understand what it is that we're asking from you. And I think that that's what we're lacking. We're missing that and. Because the meeting that I went to this past week was a lot about be fluid, just be prepared for things to change, which I thought was kind of ironic because that's all we do as military families is be fluid. Like we're preaching to the choir at this point. So if you're asking me to be more fluid than I already am, then I was seeing spouses kind of get stirred up, like, how much more fluid are you asking me to be? Because I've been fluid for some of us 5 years, some of us 18 years. We've been fluid for a long time. And that's okay that you're asking that. The bigger thing, though, I think we need to do is say, be fluid, and let's sit in the pocket of what we know we're about to ask you to do. And let's talk about, what do you need in order to get through this next season? Do you need each other? Do you need resources? Let's talk about the resources that we do have. Let's talk about how you're going to lean on each other for that support. Let's talk about how we're going to make ourselves available as leaders to offer that support, especially if you don't have it, or if you're lacking the resources, if there's gaps there. So I want to make sure that I'm giving that caveat of, if we're going to ask for family readiness, that we offer both sides. Because if we don't say, I see you and I see what we're asking of you, and I know I'm asking for something that's really tough to ask of you right now, I'm asking the culture to give when there's nothing left for you to give, then at least acknowledge that. And I have a feeling that if you acknowledge that, that you are going to win families' hearts. So if you are listening right now, and if that resonates with you, and if that would be helpful, if you heard leaders that would say, yes, family readiness is important, but I also know what we're asking of you is difficult, please make a comment and make sure that I'm not completely off base here. But I know that that's something that I felt. I ran into some other spouses that felt the same way, that when they were asked to be fluid and be prepared to revolve around their service member, that they believed that that was true. But it was also very difficult to hear that as well. Especially, we also need to be mindful that our culture right now, the military family culture, is much more diverse and even more educated than they've ever been before. We have family members that are working, that are highly educated, that are experienced, have a great deal of wisdom to offer, a great deal of mentoring to offer. You guys are rock stars. You not only are volunteering, but you're leading and you're running groups and you are there for each other and your family members. And so there's a lot more that we can offer our community and each other than making sure that there's dinner on the table at home and making sure that the home is running well. So I think that we have all of that to pull from, and you can do that, leader. I know I'm talking to leaders a little bit today, but you can pull from that in your audience. You can say, we have an immense amount of wisdom and subject matter experts here in the room that you can pull from if they're in a good spot and ready to serve each other. Okay, let's see. Megan is talking about this. She's agreeing it's okay to have a bad day, to have to let families see that. They're more likely to actually buy in and do the hard stuff with you. Absolutely, Megan. And I think that's a great way to kind of sum up, thank you, Megan, what I'm trying to say is, and that is vulnerability. That as leaders, whether you're a military spouse, whether you're a serving spouse, whether you are a first responder, if you're a general, that the more authentic you are, the more transparent you are, the more vulnerable you are. And I don't mean vulnerability as in what the military sees as vulnerability, which is weakness and risk. That's what they understand vulnerability to mean. But when you're authentic and transparent, when you can share a little bit of your own story of what it was like to get through a very difficult season that asked a lot of you, that's where you're going to win families over. And so I just want to make sure that we have that encouragement out today, that if you are a military spouse specifically, if you're a first responder spouse specifically, and you are tired and you're exhausted, maybe you are starting to find yourself in that place of resentment, that is a huge red flag that it's time for you to take care of yourself, to do something for yourself before you explode or implode. And if you are one of those spouses and you are not in the book study, I'm going to encourage you to join the book study. It is not too late. We're only on chapter 3 and they're short chapters. You can read that in a day, because part of Sacred Spaces is about helping you deal with the underlying stuff that is there and present. And it helps you take a look at that and examine it so that you don't implode and explode. So you have the right words to communicate to your spouse, to communicate to your leaders. So, so important and so powerful. You have great influence over yourself and your own self-care. We don't need more family members, especially, exploding or imploding and having our families fall apart. And by the way, none of us, even the serving spouses, you don't have to wear a mask. There's nothing that says that if you don't struggle, that you're less of a leader. In fact, I was in a panel discussion this morning for the school board here locally. And we had some active duty leaders that were on the panel with me. And one of the most powerful moments was when one of the green suits, one of the leaders, was actually vulnerable about how difficult it's been to ask his family to move as much as they've moved, to ask as much as he's had to ask of his wife. And to see him tear up, it moved the entire room. And 3/4 of the room were all teachers and educators, but 3/4 of the room were military spouses. And you better believe in that moment they felt seen, simply because someone was willing to be vulnerable, to go, this is a very difficult life. And what I'm being asked to do is difficult. For me to leave for a deployment and do what I've been trained to do, and do what I feel a calling to do, something that makes me feel successful and like I'm making an impact not only in the world, but on my family too, in my ability to provide for my family. That I know that that asks a lot of my spouse and my children. And the fact that somebody else sees that and can be vulnerable about that makes a huge difference in those of us who feel the same way. That it really validates the fact that this is a hard life, but when we can all at least sit in that pocket for just a moment and be honest about that, that we're seen, we feel understood, we don't feel alone like we did before. I can't tell you how many military spouses came up to me today and said, thank you for being honest. Like, and they have this look in their eyes like they're about to burst into tears. And I know that those of you who are watching this right now, some of you feel that way too. I'm about to burst into tears because it just feels like too much. What I'm being asked to do just feels like too much, and I don't know if I can do it again. But if we just sit in the pocket of, yeah, this is hard, but you're not alone because I'm going through it too, can make a huge difference in our ability to then support each other to get out of that pocket, to claim our grittiness, because that's what's awesome about our culture, both military and first responder culture, that we have a level of grittiness that's bigger and stronger than resilience. Resilience says I can bounce back. There ain't no bouncing back coming from Corey Weathers. And I'm a counselor supposed to have lots of coping skills, but I have never seen myself with the ability to bounce back. And honestly, I don't want to bounce back to what I was before. I want to bounce forward. I don't want to return back to what I was before. So I don't want to be resilient. I want to be gritty. I want to say I have the ability to dig deep when I need to dig deep and say I have a future goal, even if my goal is to get through a deployment or get through an assignment or get through to retirement. Whatever that goal is, I have a long-term goal and I have the work ethic to get myself there. That's what gritty is. And that's what this community has, a grittiness factor. Every single one of you has a grittiness factor that says we can, when push comes to shove, keep moving forward with a goal in sight that says, I want to be a better person than what I was yesterday. I don't want to bounce back. I don't want to be just resilient. I want to be gritty and better than who I was yesterday. And that's what you guys have. However, if we don't learn to sit in a pocket of acknowledging when things are hard and just sit there for a second and talk about that, then we're going to, I know last week I talked about faking it till you make it. If you keep faking it with never having these moments of realness, then you're going to be a shadow of yourself. You're going to be like a shell by the end of it because you didn't allow yourself to be authentic and honest with what's really going on deep down inside. And so when I started this trip for the Sacred Spaces journey, when I had this opportunity to go overseas, I didn't realize just how tired I was. I didn't realize how resentful I had actually become until I had the opportunity to leave. And I'll be honest, there was a part of me that was like, finally, I get to do something fun, right? He gets to go on all these trips and go overseas and see these new things. And at the time I was a mom to toddlers and I loved that. It's a great season of life to be in. But there was a part of me that just wanted to escape and go do something really cool. And here was my opportunity finally to do it. And it was like my turn, right? I know some of you guys have felt that way. But underneath that was fatigue and resentment. That's what was really at the base of that. And I had to take a look at that because I'll be honest with you, it was ugly. It was ugly. And there's others of you who have that something going on too, where there is that resentment, that years of being fatigued and having a lot of difficulty, being a lot of stress asked of you has gotten you to a place of exhaustion where now we're in resentment. And that's what we need to take a look at. And I will be honest with you, I wrote this book 3 years ago, and the reason why I'm doing it again now is because a lot has been asked of my family. We've moved a lot lately, and I realized I was getting that back. There was a part of me that was starting to struggle again. There was a part of me that was getting fatigued again. There was a part of me that was getting kind of resentful. And I actually had to ask Matt's forgiveness over the past week or two, because I had to say I didn't realize that I had gotten to a place where it wasn't fun anymore. This lifestyle didn't feel like an adventure anymore. It was starting to feel like it was doing more harm than good. And I needed a reset. And part of that reset was me going to my spouse and going, I need to take a look at that resentment and that fatigue in my life. That's a huge red flag that we should have better self-care, that I needed better self-care. And I needed to cast new vision for what this lifestyle is about and why we're doing it. And part of that reclaiming is that we can be excited for each other. We can be excited for what our spouse does. If you are a military spouse, it's about getting excited about what your spouse does again. And it's about inviting your spouse to get excited about what you're doing. It's a two-sided thing. This isn't supposed to be you revolving around your spouse in the military 24/7. That's not a marriage. That's idolizing our spouse and idolizing the military. And the military someday won't be there for you. It'll just be you and your spouse sitting in rocking chairs on the front porch, and everything else will have kind of moved on. And if we are revolving our entire life around the military or around our spouse, that is taking those entities and making them an idol and something that we are worshiping. And we are never meant to do that. It's not healthy. Instead, we live in a lifestyle that may ask us to be fluid, and that's okay. But we need to make sure that we're balancing our marriages out to asking about what our spouse is loving about their job and getting excited about that with them again, and also inviting our spouse into our world and inviting them to have an opportunity to enjoy the things that are bringing you joy. And spouses that are at home, or even if you're working, where is your joy? Do you have joy? Because if you don't have joy, then you're not inviting your spouse into anything joyful. And if you don't have that joy and that purpose, we need to take a look at that and find out what does bring you joy, what brings you purpose. Because we should be just as excited about whatever is going on in our life and inviting our spouse into that so that they can experience that empathy as well, and it becomes two-sided. Like, I get to love what my husband does as a chaplain. I need to get back to a place where when he comes home from his job, that he tells me what he loved about his job that day, because that makes it easier for me to send him out the next day. And it makes it easier when he comes home and says, I got to deploy, that I can go, I'm there with you because I love you enough that I want you to do what you are built to do, what you're called to do, and what you're good at doing. And however I can support you to do that so that the mission comes first, I'm excited about that. But likewise, I need to be able to have some joy in my life where I can say, let me tell you about my day. Let me tell you about what happened with the kids today. Let me tell you how one of them had an aha moment and how much joy that brought to my life. And you better believe that's going to bring joy to your spouse's life, right? Or let me tell you about what I experienced at work today. Or let me tell you about an experience of what I learned today if you're in school. Or let me tell you about how I served the neighbor. The neighbor needed something, and how great it felt to serve that neighbor because I was there for them right when they needed it, and how much joy that brought me. Or what it was like to go and volunteer and make a difference in the community. Are we sharing those things? Are we experiencing joy in those things? Are you inviting your spouse to experience that joy with you? It's not just about the military. It's not just about the mission. It's about both sides loving the mission together. Does that make sense? So I know this is kind of a preaching video today. And Matt and I are actually going to do another podcast episode about this topic, because he and I agreed that you need to hear from both of us. And an episode specifically on what does it mean to actually support each other, and how can we start changing this language just a little bit, so that leaders can, because I absolutely believe that our leaders care about our families, because most of them have families too, and those families have had to give a lot too and sacrifice a lot too. And so I think I know our leaders care about their families. We just need to work a little bit more on understanding what the culture needs right now and how to serve the culture, at least through our communication, to say, we know we're asking a lot of you. And if you need to take care of yourself, let us know how we can support you in doing that we see you, and we know that this is a hard time right now, but that you're not alone. And the best things that I've heard from leaders is them saying, I've been there, maybe I am there right now too. But the one thing that we do have is each other, and that what we're asked to do is a great sacrifice. But that sacrifice, and here's a big thing, cast vision for what this sacrifice is for, right? Globally, what this sacrifice is for. The sacrifice is because there are other countries that don't have what we have. We've been through a lot in this last week, I know we have as a country, but there is a lot of countries who go through that all the time. In our country, I'm not going to get into politics here, but we as military families and as first responder families do this because we have a set of values of what's right and wrong, of responsibility, of integrity, of being on the side of good. At least we want to be on the side of good instead of evil, and wanting to do something about that. That is an awesome thing for us to be a part of. And in order to fight good in the world, it means that we have to face evil. And in order to fight good in the world, that means that we have to sacrifice convenience, because it's the people that are living a life of convenience and apathy and laziness, can I say that, that don't get into the fight. And that's okay. Maybe they have a calling to do something else. But those of us who are in the fight for fighting for something good, it costs something to be in battle. It costs something from the warrior, and it also costs something from the family. But being on the side of good is always worth it. Sometimes we just need to vision cast what we're in the fight for. I hope that today you're in the fight for your marriage, that you are in the fight for yourself and your self-care. If you don't know what your purpose is, and if you have been ignoring yourself for far too long, I hope that you will reach out to a local clinician. We have the Life Giver directory on the Life Giver website, where you can find a clinician close to you that has a passion to serve military and first responder families. If there's not one in your area, we need to find more in your area. Any help that you can provide in finding those clinicians is very important to me, so that people like you can find somebody local to you. If you want to reach out to me for the Strength Finder consulting, I'll be happy to do a couple sessions with you so that you can discover what your purpose is and find that joy again. It's really a great feeling to find that purpose again. If you want to join the book study with Sacred Spaces, there's still room for you to do that and finding community in that too. So I hope that you're in the fight for your marriage and the fight for yourself, and that you're taking a good care of yourself and not finding yourself to a place where you're either imploding or exploding. So I know that I've talked a lot. I'm going to give just a couple minutes that if you have questions, I know I've gone on for a long time. If you have questions, I would love to hear from you. Charlene says that what I said, that resonates with her. Let's see, is it Citrine says, what I've seen that can make a difference: unit leadership, command teams that are involved, caring and aware of and know their soldiers and families, and also make it a priority to keep their soldiers and families aware of what's going on and what's available to them. FRGs are coming back, guys. And those of you who are first responders, mingle with the military families in your town. We need to be bridging that divide, because those family readiness groups, regardless of what branch you're in, they're coming back because we recognize that we need them and we need each other more than ever. Families are exhausted, and so we need each other. We need to come out of our homes and get off social media, and we need to actually see each other face to face and see how we can support each other a little bit better. But those are coming back, and you're right that commanders are wanting to take care of our families a little bit more, and they're doing a great job of that. And so please hear what I said before, is that I'm not being cynical and critiquing necessarily, as much as I'm challenging that as we ask for our families to take care of everything at home, that they're also taking care of themselves. And don't just say, make sure you're taking care of yourself. Don't just say that. Say, I see you. My wife is this is not easy for her either. Talk about your own experience of what's difficult. Talk about the things that you have done that has helped you as a family. Mentoring is so important. Mentoring from our senior leadership, our mid-level seniors are so important. I would count myself. If you have gone through one deployment, or if you've been in the life of service, I'm going to say for 3 years or more, 5 years or more, I'm calling you a mid-senior. It is time for you to step up and start mentoring, because the newest generation needs to hear from you, and you have wisdom to offer. So stand up and go out and meet people. Go out for coffee with people and say, this is what helped me get through this time. I have a little bit more energy than you might have, but I'm here for you if you need it. We need to start stepping up and doing face-to-face mentoring. So that was a whole lot and not about family bonds, the chapter of family bonds, but I think that it was an important message that we needed to talk about. If you are in the book club and you are on the Facebook page, in the next few minutes, I'm going to be going over there and doing a quick video with them and announcing who is going to be the winner of a Starbucks card for commenting on the question that I asked. So you have a couple minutes to head over there and add your answer if you want to be included in that drawing. I plan to do some more giveaways in the book club as we go along. I hope that this resonated with you just a little bit. Family bonds, that chapter has a lot to do with my relationship with my dad, and I'm going to be covering that a little bit more even in the next chapter, so I don't feel too stressed out that I didn't get into that today. But family bonds is a lot about how amazing it was to especially see our Air Force. And, you know, all of our branches are incredible to see when you get to see them in action like I did overseas. But I will tell you, at least for this one chapter, when I got to see the precision and the excellence with which our Air Force serves, it is amazing to watch. So if you're an Air Force family, I just want to say thank you for what your service member does. That my dad was an Air Force pilot, and I saw him with new eyes and a new perspective. And this trip gave me the opportunity to appreciate our Air Force in an entirely different way. If you're Army and you've not crossed paths with a lot of the Air Force, I can tell you that we could not do what we do in our branch as Army, Marines, Navy, without the Air Force, without the planes that get us where we need to go and get there on time with excellence. And if you've never seen an in-flight fueling, that was something that was unbelievable to watch. And so I'm so thankful for our Air Force and what you guys do. Whether you fly a plane or whether you change a tire, every little piece matters. Every little part of the mission matters. Whether you are changing that tire to make sure that that plane takes off at the right moment, or whether you are that spouse at home that manages everything that you manage, you are all, every single one of you, even if you're a first responder family, you are all part of the mission that makes this entire thing happen. Never forget that you have incredible influence into those around you, your kids, your marriage, your unit, your families, the overall mission, and the strategic mission that we have globally as well. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. Thank you for putting up with a little bit longer video than usual, but if you know me, you know I'm not short. I'm very long-winded. So I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you guys next time. If you're on the Facebook page, the Life Giver Facebook page, I'll be heading over there soon to do a quick drawing for a Starbucks card. So thanks guys for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.